789-10, 10-9-87-65-4321, 1-2-3-4-5-6, 789-10, 10-9-87-65-4321. Today, September 25th, 2018, this edition of Roland Martin Unfiltered. Bill Cosby is in a jail as we speak, sentenced today to 3 to 10 years in prison. We will talk with Vincent Thompson of WURD Radio in Philadelphia, who was in the courtroom when the judge rendered that particular verdict. He'll give us all the details about what took place, but also he was there covering all of the victim statements after the trial. We'll also talk with comedian Joe Torre, of course, who attended this trial on behalf of Bill Cosby, was with him, shared his thoughts on today's verdict. Also, defense attorney out of Dallas, Yodit Tuwelde, she also shares her thoughts in terms of this case and also talks about Bill Cosby and Brett Kavanaugh, how those two are two stark contrasts in terms of what we're looking at right now. We'll also break down the PR strategy of the Cosby campaign. Many people said it was a constant blunder. We'll also hear at the Spirit of Democracy Awards, we'll be chatting with Melanie Campbell, of course, about the impact of voting all across this country, less than 50 days, the midterm elections. Folks, it is a packed show. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time. And it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Put
A stunning day in Pennsylvania courtroom. We're just outside of Philadelphia. Bill Cosby, the iconic comedian and actor, a groundbreaker in Hollywood, sent to prison. It was shortly before 2 p.m. when the judge handed down his sentence, 3 to 10 years in prison for Bill Cosby, who earlier this year was convicted of sexual assault stemming from an incident with Andrea Constant in 2004. Many folks did not believe we would actually see the image of Bill Cosby being led out of a courtroom in handcuffs to an awaiting car. The judge denied an opportunity for him to remain free pending appeals. And so as we speak, Bill Cosby is in a jail there in Pennsylvania. He'll be going to the newest state prison there in Pennsylvania, serving at least 3 years as a result of this sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 3 years, but again, the sentence is for 3 to 10 years. Earlier today, the judge ruled that called Bill Cosby a violent sexual predator. And that's what he'll be known as. And so, of course, that was an analysis done by the court after he was convicted, where yesterday testimony took place where he was called that, saying they were not sure that Bill Cosby would not do, again, what he has been convicted of. It has been a long time for a number of those women who've accused Bill Cosby of sexual assault. The number is in excess of 50, yet he was convicted for what took place with Andrea Constant, a former basketball coach with the Temple University basketball team. Of course, the university Bill Cosby used to sit on the board of trustees, was a huge supporter of as well. Outside of the courtroom, his publicist read a statement from Camille Cosby blasting the judge, blasting the decision, also calling it blatant racism and sexism. Later in the show, we'll talk with Vincent Thompson of WURD Radio in Philadelphia, black-owned radio station there, who was in the courtroom. He's been covering this trial from the beginning, so we'll hear from him. All kind of folks have been reacting on social media to the news of Bill Cosby being, again, sent to prison. You still have reaction. The Television Critics Association, earlier, before the sentence even came down, pulled their Lifetime Achievement Award for Bill Cosby, one of many honors that have been taken away from him as a result of him going on trial, being convicted, and now being sentenced. As a part of his sentencing, Bill Cosby is going to have to, for the rest of his life, also do constant counseling as a result, and will be designated a sexual offender even if he is released from prison. One of the folks who was with Bill Cosby during this trial, the second trial, remember the first one ended in a mistrial, is comedian Joe Torre. He attended several days of this particular trial with Bill Cosby. Earlier today, I caught up with Joe Torre to listen to what he had to say. We'll talk to him in just a moment. We also chatted with Yodit Tewelde, a defense attorney out of Dallas, who gave her analysis on this as well. You've often seen her on this show. She's been following this as well. And in our conversation, she broke down various missteps, but also the fact that she is not shocked at all that Bill Cosby is sitting in prison. Here's my conversation with attorney Yodit Tewelde. All right, so Yodit, just your initial thoughts on, again, Bill Cosby, 3 to 10 years, must serve at least 3 years in prison before he's eligible for parole, and the judge remanding him immediately and being led out in handcuffs.
Not surprised. I think the team, obviously, they were asking for house arrest. Not going to happen. The fact that he had 5 accusers testify in the guilt innocence portion, Andrea Constant's personal statement that was read, her testimony, prior bad acts witnesses that testified yesterday, all of that, considering the SVP finding that he was a sexually violent predator, all of that played a factor in the judge saying, you know what, you're gonna do the minimum, the 3 years to 10. Now, remember, the prosecutors were asking for, 5 to 10? So he went below what the prosecutors were asking for. House arrest would have been idiotic. You have someone who's just been labeled a sex offender who's going to have to now register for that for a lifetime, who's going to have to continuously get counseling for a lifetime. And so, and mind you, the judge wouldn't be able to factor this in, but Cosby said nothing. when he had the opportunity to. He didn't necessarily have to say that he was guilty, of course, or apologize, because of course that would have implications on their appeal. But he could have at least asked for leniency, some mercy, but he said nothing. So the judge can't consider something that no one says. So all he had at that point was what the state was providing, and that was testimony after testimony of survivors, accusers, of the like. So I'm not surprised that he's got to do prison time.
As a lawyer, as a defense attorney, when you look at the multiple defense teams he had, the multiple lawyers he had, when you look at the comments the publicists made after the previous mistrial, when you look at the other comments, and then of course as they were heading to being sentenced, Camille Cosby very much attacking this judge, saying she hired a former prosecutor to investigate this judge in his past. I mean, I know judges are not supposed to take those things into account, but that is a lot things happening. You know, when you would naturally you would say, you might want to temper that down. Your thoughts about all of that as well, leading up to the second trial, and then of course sentencing.
Well, ever since Cosby has even been charged with this crime, he's had the same PR agent who I think has been making failure after failure after failure in the public eye, because if it's all about optics, you want to keep your mouth closed. You just don't know who's listening, not just the judge, but a potential jury pool, right? And they want to appeal as well. So there's going to have to be a court that's going to be looking at that appeal, and they're also listening to what you're saying. So what you say does have an effect, even if it's not coming out of Cosby's mouth. Camille Cosby, I'm not sure what her motivation is, considering the fact that a jury found her husband guilty on 3 felonies. The judge was going to render the punishment. I don't know if this is just more about optics. She just wants to let people know that this was maybe an unfair trial so that she could somehow save a shred of dignity when it comes to her husband's legacy that's essentially been flushed down the toilet since this has begun. So I don't know what her motivations are. I just don't think that it's helpful in any way. And I guess we'll see in the next coming, weeks when the appeal comes down and what that's about. But she didn't even come to court. I don't know what that says. That could be very.
Well, we got to remember, she did not come to most of the trial. I think they came.
Well, you would think she would come on the last day, though, Roland. I mean, he's going to be sentenced today,
and I
you would have thought that she would have.
And clearly, I don't know of anybody who actually thought that he wouldn't get jail time. I mean, at the end of the day, you could look at, again, all things that happened leading up to this. Look at even yesterday and know.
No, it's not happening.
That he was going to get jail time. When you look at this in terms of this society we're in, I had a tweet earlier that Vanity Fair set out where they had this one writer who said that Bill Cosby going to prison is somewhat not it's somewhat good, if you will, to take away the bitterness of Donald Trump. And I responded by saying, how does Bill Cosby going to prison somehow alleviate the bitterness of Donald Trump being in the White House, considering Donald Trump bragged about grabbing women by their vagina? That's a guy.
And he's the president.
He's the president of the United States.
Right.
A Supreme Court nominee who has been allegations of sexual harassment, sexual assault as well, who's about to have a lifetime appointment as well. I said, I just don't understand how Bill Cosby going to prison somehow goes, ooh, I feel better. Your thoughts on that?
So I got a lot of heat, and I'm still getting heat on Twitter right now for something that I said on CNN earlier. And I made the comparison between Kavanaugh's accusers and what's been alleged, against him, and what's been happening with Bill Cosby. And I think people are not really understanding, or choose to just fail to understand what I'm trying to say. In terms of Kavanaugh, people are already, and I'm talking about Republicans on TV, in the media, there are people on Twitter who support this man without ever hearing just even a word coming out of Dr. Ford or the other accusers' mouths. That, to me, signals something, because the reaction when it comes to Cosby's accusers, do you remember that magazine that had all of his accusers on the cover?
Right.
People were in support, as they should be, right? In support of hearing these women and their truth. That was supported. When it comes to Kavanaugh, though, there isn't a real opportunity for these women to tell their story and actually try and persuade, even though that's not their job, to persuade the Senate Republicans, for example, this Thursday, of what they're trying to say when their minds are already made up. They've already said out the gate. I'll listen to her, but if I had a juror tell me that they've already made up their mind with regards to the guilt of my client, that juror would be X'd out automatically. If I had a juror who was already picked, say a potential juror who was already picked, and they, made it known that they had already made up their minds before listening to all the evidence, I would ask for a mistrial. That's not okay. Now, I understand that there's a distinguishment between a court of law and a hearing. Got it. But if we're really trying to get to the truth of these accusations for a man who's trying to get the seat to the highest court in the land, if we're trying to get to the bottom of the truth, then why are you not calling potential witnesses, compelling their testimony? Why are you not making him submit to a polygraph test? Because one of the accusers actually did, and it came back to show that she was being truthful. So it's how they're brushing her accusations and allegations under the rug for Kavanaugh, but when it comes to Bill Cosby, it's an applause. It's hypocritical.
Last question.
So many levels.
Last question. Were you shocked that we even saw what happened today? That when these allegations first came out, when Hannibal Buress, of course, his comedic routine went viral. Then, of course, this thing. Then all of a sudden, he gets go through this whole deal. All these women come out, and then he gets charged on the last day before the statute of limitations ran out. Were you shocked to see Bill Cosby led off in handcuffs?
On one end, I was, because this is Bill Cosby. This is America's dad. This is someone I've watched growing up, wanted to be a part of the family. So seeing him in this position was shocking. On the other hand, I wasn't shocked, because you have this man who has been revered in our community, who's been someone who's been a father figure to all of us, someone who's been an example for us in the Black community, and to be taken down the way he has been, and rightfully so. Not surprised, especially in the media. I would say in the media, it's been more than what I've seen with other offenders who don't look like us. Plain and simple. I mean, Brock Turner, do I need to mention him? Who, of course, he's
the former Stanford diver who, again,
3 months
raped a woman, and as she was lying on the side of a road, and the
found
judge
guilty.
And the judge said, "Don't want his life ruined."
This is how we categorize white young offenders. It's like, oh, it was just boyish behavior. Oh, they have so much life to live. We can't ruin their future. Now, we're talking about an 81-year-old Black man, but still nonetheless a Black man. And I've been in the criminal justice system for about a decade now, and I've seen the stark differences. So on one hand, I was shocked. On the other hand, I wasn't.
All right. Ready to 12 day. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Roland.
All right, folks. About right now, Bill Cosby is actually being moved to a state correctional facility. This is the actual booking photo that was shot of Bill Cosby when he was first transferred to the jail. As I said, he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, taken out in a vehicle, went to a waiting facility, and then the booking photo was taken. He, of course, in the courtroom handed authorities his watch, his wallet. He came out with his cane in handcuffs. In this photo, you see him. Also, he took his tie off. You see him in his suspenders and his shirt as well. That's how he was actually led out of the courtroom. Many folks, of course, shocked to actually see this day come. One of them is comedian Joe Torre. He is someone, of course, who was with Bill Cosby in this particular case, was there by his side a number of days during this retrial. I caught up with him earlier today, where he shared his thoughts again on seeing the comedic icon Bill Cosby being sent to prison.
All right, Joe, first off, you obviously, when Bill Cosby was on trial before he was convicted, attended several of the days, spoke out on his behalf, walking with him. Just your reaction to him now being sentenced, having to serve at least 3 years in state prison before he's even eligible for parole.
Well, first of all, my thing is for everybody at this point to try to, reach some type of point of healing, what I'm saying, to a point where, they're relieved. And it seems like even in his mind, and even in some of the accusers' minds, that, okay, they have reached some point of healing. So, kudos to everybody that thinks that, that they have reached a higher point of understanding. And, And in my day, in age, I'm like, wow. I mean, you got to be, really on your toes for, what happened 30-something years ago, 40 or 50-something years ago. In this day and age, people can kind of see, that they can get justice. On my behalf, from his thinking, I was just there for, for her case. And that case, what they say, some still false evidence and stuff was still, that was implicated, was presented in that manner. And
You mean the Andrea Constant?
Yeah, you're right.
Got it.
That's the only one I witnessed. That's the only evidence I saw. That's the only couple trials that I've been to. So I can only speak on that one.
Is it difficult to first of all, the judge today agreed with the assessment that he is a violent sexual predator, and to think that somebody who was called America's dad, somebody who was one of the most beloved figures, every Q rating, whatever, ranked top 3 at 81 years old, will now be known as that. Obviously, a groundbreaking actor, groundbreaking comedian.
Well, I mean, people put titles on there. I mean, you didn't really hear that just mouth. You hear it. If people say stuff over and over and over again and try to make, like you said, the world's greatest dad seemed like he was some predator or some killer, like he was, Jack the Ripper or something like that. And make it seem like I was there. So, I saw how they can, make words or make the sentencing seem like he was this mass, killer, murderer, rapist, stalking women. And it wasn't anything like that. So in order to, in this day of the way the media has to do to keep you clicking and liking, I mean, they use those words. But that's not who he is as a person. And that's not what I've seen. And that's not, to me, what he's shown the world as far as him being a philanthropist and giving back. So I on the speak of that, I mean, I have to say on his side, I gotta hold up the cape up for all the good that he's done.
And what was it? Is it hard for you to, with all you just said, the things that he's done for HBCUs, the things that he has done for the arts, being again a groundbreaking person in Hollywood, to see this legendary comedian led away in handcuffs to prison, knowing full well that he will spend at least the next 3 years there before he's even eligible for parole?
I mean, that side is is uneasy for some. But to also see and know his spirit and hear his publicist speak about where he is, because he, they say he didn't show any remorse, because if you're not guilty, why should you show any remorse? If you feel you've been set up, then how can you, accept healing for that? But I mean, that's the same thing in this day and age. You gotta go to, you got a president in office that's been accused of things worse than that. You got a judge, a Supreme Court judge that's about to be put in office that still have accusers coming out. And, they're not even, and they, their accusations were way worse than what they said Bill Cosby did. And, so I'm like, if that's going to happen, and if this is the path for justice to be seen, then make it be seen for everybody of all color and everybody that's been accused of something that has high power that could have taken advantage of that. And if that's the light that we see in this age, then, I'm all for that, because, it's a lot of stuff that's been done in the dark that people need to be held accounted for. And I don't think that you can't put, one of our greatest African-American men on trial like that without putting a lot of other people that are very suspect and guilty as well.
Last question for you. You obviously were there, walked in the court with him, stood by his side. Would you also plan to visit him while he is in prison?
I mean, yeah, if I get the opportunity. I mean, I was asked to come, to come see for myself, to see the truth, and that's what I did. If I was asked to, to be at the Michael Jackson trial, I would have been there. If I could have been at the OJ trial, I would have been there. If I could have asked to see anything in that, I would see that. But I've also went to see, a couple people in jail. I went to see Mike Tyson when he was in jail. A couple of other people I don't want to throw out. But I mean, if I get the opportunity to go, man, because it's a learning situation, and it's also what the Bible said. Have you come to me at my lowest point? Have you come to, to offer healing to me wherever I've been? And, that's who I am. I'm about positivity and healing and growth for everybody. So if that's the light that we see today, then, then that's what's been done.
All right. Joe Torre, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much.
Hey, man. Appreciate you. Take it easy.
All right, folks, let's chat with Crystal High, CEO of Influence, a arts and media company focused on social influence and public policy and all that good stuff. Lana Walls, a longtime PR practitioner. Glad to have both of you here. First off, he was convicted in April. Charges first came back in full force in 2014. But we're both of you still shocked to see Bill Cosby, 81 years old, America's dad, in handcuffs.
So when you put this in context of this Me Too moment, I think the verdict itself is not shocking, but the broader cultural phenomenon, thinking about growing up watching The Cosby Show and how, you know, you're inside kind of America's living room, right? And so this was such an integral part of, I know how I came to be, and it was like, oh, The Cosby Show, this is going to be.
And also on today was the debut of A Different World, 27, whatever, some odd years ago as well.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like, culturally, it's shocking for that personal impact, but because of this moment and just the volume of outcry, not only in the Me Too movement generally, but specifically against Cosby, you know, as you mentioned, 50 plus complaints coming forward of this repeated alleged sexual conduct and misconduct. And so I think that it isn't totally shocking in that regard. The sentence is what's shocking, right? So 3 to 10 years at 81 years old, you're effectively saying this is a life sentence. I don't necessarily foresee that Cosby's going to be able to live out that time because he's not going to Club Fed. This is state prison that he's going to be in for the next 3 to 10 years. So that's a lot to take in.
Lon, when you think about how so many people read his books, watched his comedy, watched television shows, his show saved NBC, the network. When you think about all of that, you think about the millions given to HBCUs, what he has done for black artists. I mean, we can go down the line. Right. I still think for a lot of people, it is stunning and shocking. Just not the fall from grace, but just literally all of that. Where every year when the studies were done, who were the most revered figures in America, he was in the top 3.
Right. It's sad, but it's not as much shocking because you look at the number of folks, the number of complaints, and the fact that we talk about PR strategy to go on the attack like he did. I mean, I think they kind of reinvigorated the whole Me Too movement. It was a Me Too movement before it really got hot because of the fact that he attacked a lot of folks, and when the numbers started to increase, you know, that's a problem. And then all of a sudden you're starting to think, well, this is America's dad, but was America dad? Is there something underneath that we've missed all this time? You know, and that's a problem. I think that's a problem that created for him.
But also the fact that this sentence comes down today, and here we are 2 days away, 48 hours away from Brett Kavanaugh testifying on Capitol Hill, somebody appointed to, named to the Supreme Court, and this guy could very well be one of 9 Supreme Court justices. You have a person sitting in the Oval Office who bragged about sexually harassing, assaulting women. And he's a president of the United States. And in fact, there was a Vanity Fair writer who, as I said to Yadid, who tweeted something along the lines of, well, you know, the Cosby sentence eases the bitterness of a Trump in the White House. And I'm going, how in the hell does that happen? That you somehow think that? I mean, so you juxtapose a Kavanaugh and a Trump with Bill Cosby. Cosby's going to prison. One of these guys, Kavanaugh, will likely on Saturday be put on the Supreme Court.
So I think on one hand, to your point, this really underscores what is just traditional and historic inequity in this country, right? Not saying that sexual assault or any of that conduct is any less heinous, right, in any of these cases, but the reality is you have a black man being held to a different standard than even the President of the United States.
We did a story yesterday of a white man in Alaska who strangled a woman, sexually assaulted her, and got probation.
Right. You've got a 2-track. You really have. It's a dual society, and it always has been. We have to realize that. But the fact it is, you know, it doesn't make it any better, no matter who does it. That's the problem. You know, we have to really kind of address that within our own communities as well.
It was, of course, a wild scene outside of the courtroom, in the courtroom today. Vincent Thompson of WURD Radio, of course, black-owned radio there in Philadelphia. Vincent has been covering this trial for a significant period of time. He was actually in the courtroom today. Vincent, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you, Roland. Good to be on the show.
First and foremost, describe for us the scene moments before, first of all, before the sentencing, when the judge came out and said he agreed with the assessment and called Bill Cosby a violent sexual predator.
Well, here's what happened. Before Bill Cosby was sentenced a couple of months ago, there was an assessment done by a group called the Pennsylvania Sexual Assessment Board that can recommend whether someone's a sexually violent predator or not. They look at transcripts, they look at testimony to come up with their decision. They also offered Mr. Cosby the opportunity to be interviewed. He preferred not to be interviewed by that assessment board. They issued their assessment, and then it's up to the judge to decide whether the assessment is the right thing or the wrong thing. He decided it was, and what it really means is that Mr. Cosby is under strict orders for reporting. So if he does get out within 3 years, because a 3 to 10 year sentence, as the judge indicated, he has to stay at least 3 years in a state prison. After the third year, he's eligible for parole. So if he would meet parole and would get out, then he would have certain things he'd have to do, similar to Megan's Law, where he'd have to report where he's living. He would have to. The thing I think that's most shocking for Mr. Cosby, and even kind of looked puzzled in the courtroom, was when they said they will list his name, address, and the crime on a website for sexual victims, for sexual assault victims, that he would be public. So you would know where his address is. You would know what he was convicted of. So I think that's the one thing that shocked a lot of people. And then when the sentencing came down, the sentencing law in Pennsylvania for what Mr. Cosby was convicted of is 22 to 36 months. So the fact that he got 3 years is right within the guidelines. Now remember, the district attorney was asking for 5 to 10 years, so he wanted him to serve 5 years minimum before he could have parole. The judge decided to do 3.
Vincent, the judge said, quote, "It is time for justice in a court of law. The day has come. The time has come." That's what he said right before he sentenced Bill Cosby. I have read some reports that Bill Cosby had his head down the entire time. So can you describe for us what you saw? What was Bill Cosby's reaction as the judge read that sentence?
Well, he was looking straight ahead. It was difficult to really see what his reaction was because there's 100 people in the courtroom and he was at the very front, and Mr. Cosby's back was toward us, and there were also people sitting in front of most of the media. So it was difficult to see what his position was. But I can tell you, after the verdict was read, he was quiet. He looked at his attorneys. And I think the thing that shocked him most is that he was going to be taken away in handcuffs. I don't know if he was prepared to be taken away moments later in handcuffs to a county prison. And that's where he's at right now. He's in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility.
At what point?
And then he'll be transferred to a state jail.
Vincent, at what point did the judge clear the courtroom? So were you in the courtroom when the bailiffs or the officers came over to Bill Cosby, or did that take place after the courtroom was cleared?
The sheriffs came toward Bill Cosby, but then they cleared the courtroom, and then it was after everybody had left the courtroom where you see the video of Bill Cosby being walked out with the handcuffs on the front of his hand. He was not handcuffed to the back. He was handcuffed to the front and then let out. But I can tell you right now, he is currently in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility, which is a state facility. He'll probably stay here a few days before he's transferred to what's called SCI Phoenix, which is the state prison here in southeastern Pennsylvania. And then they will assess him to determine what state prison he will actually end up in. There's no guarantee he's going to end up at Montgomery County prison. He could end up at a prison anywhere in the state.
The New York Post has this story. Bill Cosby laughs before going into custody. They claim that he was seen cracking jokes with his team in the Montgomery County Court as the sheriff's officers swooped in. Did you see anything like that?
I saw Mr. Cosby talking to Andrew Wyatt and others and laughing at some of the things, but I don't think it was Bill Cosby laughing at the sentence. You know, sometimes the tears of a clown, right? You just laugh because you got to keep from crying. That's really what I think it was, but I don't think Cosby was laughing at the sentence. What I saw is a man who was really surprised that he was going to be taken away in handcuffs that day. I mean, think about it. Right now, Bill Cosby is sitting in a jail cell in suburban Philadelphia, probably in self-containment, thinking, how the heck did I end up here after the last 4 or 5 months when I was in house arrest at my home? And that's what his attorneys were asking for. They were asking for him to stay out while he appealed his sentence. And the judge said, no, this is not a sentence that allows you to stay at home. we're sending you directly to a state facility.
There were a lot of people who were very shocked at how aggressive Camille Cosby has been in attacking the judge and criticizing the judge, hiring a former prosecutor to, quote, investigate the judge. And I talked to many other lawyers who said, look, when you're facing a retrial, the last thing you do is attack the judge. Well, after that verdict, the retrial, that's exactly what Andrew Wyatt and others did when they read a statement from Camille Cosby afterwards. And over the last 2 weeks leading up to this sentencing, the same thing has happened. Were court observers surprised at how aggressive Camille Cosby and the Bill Cosby team was, knowing full well that the decision to sentence him was in the hands of this judge?
I think they were. A lot of the courtroom observers I know that deal with Montgomery County Court, and for people that don't know, Montgomery County is maybe about 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. They were very surprised with that aggressive stance by Camille Cosby. But I think this is the thing that really amazes me. At today's sentencing, Camille Cosby was not here. And there is a section of the court where Bill Cosby could have his friends and his family. There were only 4 people in that section. 2 longtime friends, Andrew Wyatt, his spokesman, and Ebony Benson, his spokesperson. So, here's a man who for years was everything. People wanted to be near him. People wanted to touch him. But at a time when he really needed support, no one was there for him.
Vincent, just a couple more questions for you. First off,
Shoot.
You mentioned Camille Cosby not being there. She didn't attend most of that second trial, correct?
She didn't attend most of it, but we did see her at certain times. Like we saw her at the end of the second trial when they were imposing sentence. You know what I mean? When they were saying he was guilty. But we did see her. But I hadn't seen her for the 2 days of the sentencing that just happened yesterday and today, which I was pretty surprised about personally.
Last question. WURD, of course, there in Philadelphia. Bill Cosby, beloved figure in the city of Philadelphia, always represented Philadelphia, always represented Temple University. Just like here in Washington, D.C., when you think about, of course, his relationship when it comes to Ben's Chili Bowl, all of that. What do you think his legacy now will be when it comes to how African Americans will view him? Because there are a lot of black folks who are still upset with Bill Cosby's comments about black folks, about their values, about how they should behave, about black folks protesting when they said Pookie would get shot by the police and being chased out. So you still have these very hardcore feelings. What have you been hearing from WURD listeners in Philadelphia about how they still feel today about Bill Cosby?
Well, I think it's going to be the same way, Roland, as it's been since the beginning of the trial. If you're a Bill Cosby supporter and you think he was a man wrong, you're going to continue to think he's a man wrong until the end of time. But if you were somebody who's like, Bill Cosby did this to women, sexually assaulted them, people have to remember about a third of the 50 women are African American women. Mm-hmm. So, he didn't have a specific type of person. He black, white, it didn't really matter. They're going to think, he deserved what he got. And to a lot of people, Bill Cosby had over 12 attorneys representing him in the 2 retrials, in the sentencing. He's probably going to have different attorneys representing him when it comes to the appeal process that's going to take months and years. And he's had to spend well over $1 million. As you know, Pookie and Ray Ray don't have that kind of money to fight for an appeal. So I think when people argue, well, he didn't have effective counsel or he didn't have the best that money can buy, Cosby had the best that money can buy. If anybody could have had the legal team to have gotten him out of jail, it was Bill Cosby.
Vincent Thompson, WURD Radio. I certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Roland. Thanks for having me on.
I talked about catching up with the folks and getting their reaction. We did so here in Washington, D.C., chatting with, going on the street to see what folks had to say about this Bill Cosby verdict. And so we're going to play some of that for you right now.
I think it's unfair. He's 81 years old and going blind, or is blind. They could have kept him on house arrest like he'd been on for the past 6 months and still satisfy whatever they call justice. And justice ain't nothing but just us. Bill Cosby case remind me of Red Fox, Sammy Davis Jr. When our black stars reach a certain pinnacle and they stomp their toe any kind of way, they find some way to put them down. I felt or sensed they're gonna give him 10. They call this being nice 3 to 10. He ain't gonna make parole in 3. He ain't gonna make don't last 3 years. The man is 81 years old and he's blind. Come on, y'all, God, have some mercy. You know what I mean? This man needs mercy. All the things he done positive and plus, sure he made a mistake. Sure he got accused of all that. But he's 81 years old. We got to respect our elders. And we don't take elders and throw them away. And that's what they're doing to Bill Cosby. They throwing him away.
Well, I'm kind of neutral, and the reason why I'm neutral about it is, one, I never met Mr. Cosby myself personally, so I can't judge him. But also, on the other hand, it still sticks in my mind, why did they wait so long? You know, it's like someone attacking me when I was younger, and then 80 years, 60, 70 years later, I understand that they said that it was because of fear or whatever, but then even when the fear factor left, I don't understand why it took so long.
I think it's unfair. I think he's being singled out as a celebrity and as an African American celebrity, whereas we have other people who are like literally in politics, politicians, same thing, but it just seems to be passed over. So I really believe that he's being singled out, and I really think that it's unfair.
I believe that I don't care who you are, if you committed that type of crime and you were convicted of it by a jury of your peers, then you have to do your time. I don't care who he is or who he was. Like, if he did something to victimize women in general, like, you're gonna have to pay for it. As far as the label is concerned, I don't know if sometimes that's a way of some people just adding this extra stamp of him like being a demon, demonizing his name. I'm not sure. I don't see him like trying to roll up on a whole bunch of different women right now, being the age that he is. But unfortunately, in our society, as a black man, you have so many standards held. You have high standards that you have, and it's part of the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And when they get you, they get you.
All right, folks, those are the folks we caught up with outside of Ben's Chili Bowl here in D.C. Again, Bill Cosby, his image used to be on the side of that building for decades. He often talked about them in his stand-up routine, very close to the owners of Ben's Chili Bowl, and they caught a lot of flack for not taking down that mural that was on the side of the building yet when they had, of course, their anniversary. Their 60th, I believe. They then commissioned a new one and put other different figures, and Bill Cosby was not on that particular mural. So many different honors he has lost as a result of first the accusations, then being convicted, and now, of course, him heading to prison. As I mentioned, Television Critics Association, they renounced their award, Lifetime Achievement Award given to him. But also, the Hollywood Walk of Fame has made clear his star will not be removed. They have never removed the star of anybody who has gotten one, no matter what has happened to them later on. So I'm going to go back to Crystal High and Lon Walls and talk about that because, so here's, I get folks being a part of this news cycle. And I understand people responding. But whether you disagree or agree with him being convicted or going to prison, you can't erase. I mean, you can't act as if Bill Cosby is not an iconic figure in the history of television, in the history of Hollywood.
So, we tend not to deal really well with nuance, right? And like we like to look at people from this specific, let me put you in a box view. If you are not Mr. Jello Pudding Cosby man, then you can't possibly be any other thing, right? So I think this is one of those lessons, right? One of those moments where people have to step back and say, yes, he has been accused and convicted of some tragic things, right? But at the same time, he has done tremendous good in the community as well. Like if you go back, I think the number of people he has sent to college, the amount of contributions he's made to HBCUs. You made a point earlier about how people look to his books as leadership, right? And we talked about this cultural moment about growing up with the Cosby Show and what that meant culturally for so many people. That doesn't go away, but this is one of those times where we have to be able to separate the man as the person and the man from what he's done in a professional and a philanthropic context.
I mean, look, Lon, Phil Spector sitting in prison right now for killing a woman. That doesn't negate that Phil Spector is considered one of the top record producers in music history and being a genius when it comes to music. It doesn't.
Right. Well, but the thing is here is that, first of all, we go back to the PR. You have to embrace the fact he was America's dad. And sometimes our dads and grandfathers have issues. Now, we negated and we neglected that, and his legal team, his PR team, decided they're going to be aggressive. You're going to try to compare him to Emmett Till. Let's give me a break. So I think they really made a mistake in trying not to embrace his dad image. And for that, dads are sick. How many cases are we talking about? How many folks have come forward? At some point in time, you decide, let's look at this as a sickness. And you look at the case, you say, this guy is sick. What he's doing is sick. So let's go the approach of he's a sick man, let's deal with that, as opposed to trying to fight each and every person who comes forward. That's a mistake.
In fact, today, when Andrew White came out of the courtroom, he was reading a statement. I wasn't sure if that was because Ebony, who was one of the other publicists, was reading the Camille Cosby statement. So I'm not sure if he was also reading another part of it, but at one point he was reading and he invoked racism and sexism, the Bill Cosby being targeted.
Yeah, that may be true. It doesn't make what he did correct. And again, I say that this is a sick man. I mean, when it gets down to it, he's a sick man. We should have dealt with it that way.
But here's the deal: as somebody who's done PR for a number of years, would you have even been that aggressive coming out, knowing full well you're also trying to file an appeal?
Exactly. That's a mistake. When you have a potential jury pool out there, you don't want to be aggressive because in fact you don't know who you're going to affect.
Well, first of all, he's already been convicted.
Yeah.
So,
right.
but so the appeal is really would be dealing with the judges, but you're
Right.
still operating in the court of public opinion.
Exactly. Court of public opinion. Exactly. And I think at some point in time you got to pull back and say, okay, enough of this. This is not working for us. We need to retrench and figure out a better way to do this because of the fact this man's image is going to go up in flames no matter what he's done. What's happened? I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, what is his legacy going to be?
So I remember when the Smithsonian Museum of African American History, when it opened, there were a lot of people who said that they needed to put something in there with regards to his misdeeds, and they did, and that was very controversial. A lot of people felt that they shouldn't have. Others said they should have. To Vincent Thompson's point, a third of the women who's accused him, they're African American. So this is not an issue of a black man being accused by white women. There are some of these women are also black. So I'm very curious to hear from both of you. Again, how do we then have a discussion about a Bill Cosby and his place in history? And when you think back to, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example, the black stuntmen. The reality is, when you were in Hollywood and you were black and they needed a stunt person, they went and got somebody white and they put shoe polish on their face. It was Bill Cosby who said, no, you are going to get me a black stunt person. And when the documentary came out about the history of the black stunt men and stunt women, they removed Bill Cosby from the documentary, even though he was the reason for their organization even being founded because of the position that he took. When I think about Melvin Van Peebles, the Sweetback's Badass movie. That movie, Bill Cosby was one of the funders. And so how do we have a discussion about all of that Bill Cosby has done and still have a discussion about him being convicted of sexual assault?
Well, so I think on one hand, it goes back to this notion of nuance, right? And like being able to step back and have more complete and complex conversations about the various facets and factors that make up a person. It's hard to do that in a social media context when you're limited to a few, Twitter characters, or like you have a short amount of content you can put on
how about
Facebook
this
or
here?
anything
So how about
like
this
that.
here?
So
So
it's
let's
real
imagine.
conversation.
Oh, how about this one here? So let's imagine there's a discussion in LA, NAACP, any place, and we're talking about images. And we're talking about the importance of images and what they mean. For all of these years, we've always talked about what the Cosby Show meant to black folks, to have that image of a lawyer and a doctor and being presented to black America. So I would think that if that discussion is still being held, folks are going to be very leery about even bringing up the Cosby Show out of fear of ticking somebody off.
See, that's the problem. We don't need to be afraid. I mean, we need to accept, we need to embrace what he's done positively. I mean, to step back and all of a sudden he's kicked off of everything, I think that's a little bit of an overreaction. I think basically he's done a lot of good things. Let's take that into consideration. It's like we judge any other person. Our dad, he's got good stuff, he's got bad stuff. We need to kind of grow up and realize we've got to deal with the bad as well as the good. That's maybe that might be sort of a naive approach, but that's what we need to do. We can't erase this guy from what he's done. That's impossible.
I think the other angle that would be interesting is to see how you separate conversation around what has historically been Bill Cosby's legacy, and then making sure he doesn't continue to profit financially on a going forward basis, right? Because a lot of times when you think about, we're going to revoke this award, we're going to revoke your syndication, we're going to, take away all of the things that you supposedly stood for, right? That has a direct bearing on his financial well-being.
But not just him.
Not just
I
him,
mean,
the
the brother Jeffrey Holder.
Yeah. Right,
I mean,
exactly.
I think he said one of the reasons he took that job at Trader Joe's was because the residuals from the Cosby Show greatly dried up because when the show was pulled from a bunch of different networks, including black networks.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it goes back again. I'm going to keep coming to complexity and nuance, and we can't try and approach issues like this in a social media only framework where we're just going to get, here are my 140, 280 characters of pure outrage and emotion. If you're really trying to be honest about the role he's played in black culture and American culture, you have to step back and talk broadly about it.
And last point, we also have to confront the reality and challenge men and women on the reality that Bill Cosby has been convicted, because sexual harassment, sexual assault is real. Like I said, a third of these women were black, so it's not as if folks can say, "Well, no, that simply wasn't the case." We have to still deal with the issue of sex and power and money, even when it involves a Bill Cosby, and have those real discussions, and then not just say, "Well, there are double standards," and that this happened to white folks, but Bill Cosby's going to jail, but Bill O'Reilly is still out. Roger Ailes, of course, was never prosecuted. Trump and Kavanaugh, Harvey Weinstein, on and on and on, still dealing with that impacts black women as well.
Exactly.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you couldn't be more right about that analysis. And I think when we talk about these things in totality, we have a tendency to want to cancel people when we're upset with their conduct. And that, in some ways, right, it'll prove your point. But if you're ultimately trying to get to a point of progress, you can't necessarily cancel everybody. Like, we all wanted to cancel Kanye when he was talking out the mouth about, slavery being a choice.
And if I got
and I'm not buying his stuff, so it's like those are decisions, but there are still conversations that can be had about impact and cultural relevance over time. And so similar, I think, in the Cosby situation, we don't have to continue to patronize anything of his, but you can have that broader conversation.
You got to respect what he's done.
And I never remind people that Mike Tyson went to jail for rape, got out. People watched him in The Hangover and other movies, and then went to see his one-man play that was also on HBO, and people still revere Mike Tyson, who went to prison for rape.
Here buying R. Kelly records.
Yeah, right. But there's sometimes you got to have.
I mean,
you have to have contrition. You have to have contrition.
Even though R. Kelly was not convicted,
he was not.
Okay, but you still have the massive allegations against him. But again, shows you the types of discussions that are being had. Crystal Long, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Again, we chatted with some other folks on the streets here in D.C. About the Bill Cosby sentencing. Here's more of what they had to say.
Yeah, with the Bill Cosby situation today, I think It's crazy that the government allowing women to come back 30, 40 years later, when 30, 40 years earlier, when these guys became celebrities, these women chased them. I mean, women chase money. That's all. Y'all got to look at it. I don't think he raped none of these women or none of that. And how could you prove something after 30, 20, 50 years later? Yeah, this is Charlie speaking.
It's time. It was overdue. He deserves the sentence that he has been given. I think with the last trial and he got off, think that he thought he was never going to get prison for it, but any assault on women, it does not matter how long ago it has been in the past. It's a valid argument to bring against someone, and I'm happy for the verdict.
Bill Cosby being sentenced to jail today is kind of a shocker, and I feel like even if he was, like, I feel like it's such a sensitive topic that they shouldn't have announced it. But now that it's out there, my reaction, like, I feel weird about it, and I mean, it's no other feeling but to feel weird when somebody you admire, you know, is going through something this dark, and it's no explanation. So right now, I'm just kind of, I feel for him, but I'm also like outraged that this is happening, and it's no explanation. So I'm just kind of like hoping for the best right now. This is madness.
I know he hurt a lot of women. I know what he did was wrong. And he's paying for it. However, I would like also for Weinstein and all the other ones that were also accused of doing sexual bad things to women should also go to jail as well. So everyone from the gamut, from Kevin Spacey on down, should be going right along with Bill Cosby. So Bill should be the only one. He should be the start. And if he's not, if he's the start, and the rest of them not, then you'll see me back again protesting again.
All right, folks. Again, Bill Cosby, as we speak, is sitting in a Pennsylvania jail, being prepared to go to a Pennsylvania state prison. He'll be there for the next 3 years before he's eligible for parole. And so we certainly will have more on this on tomorrow's show. We are here at the Hamilton in Washington, D.C., where National Coalition of Black Civic Participation will be having their 21st Annual Spirit of Democracy Awards tonight. That's why we're here on location. We're joined by Felicia Davis with Black Women's Roundtable in Atlanta, and, of course, Melanie Campbell, leader of the Black Women's Roundtable and the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation. How y'all doing?
Wonderful.
So, but first, before we talk about voting, when we talk about, again, tonight's awards, I do have to get both of you just your thoughts on what took place today in Pennsylvania, seeing Bill Cosby being let out in handcuffs.
Well, it's a tragedy. I think, you know, his legacy is what it is, and it's definitely, it will change. His legacy will not fully for his once he's gone, but it's a tragedy at 80 plus years old. But at the same time, you have to pay the price for things that you've done. And as a black woman who's who's been impacted by, I'm a Me Too survivor, and understand that if you don't have anybody to share that story with, or feel that anybody's going to believe you, I was blessed to be able to have someone who could help me through navigate my first job out of college. I was sexually, sexually harassed by high up in the company that I worked for at that time, my first job out of college. And this guy would, every time he'd bring, you know, he wasn't my direct supervisor, he was above everybody. He was the regional director. And he would have me come into the office and, you know, you're doing a great job. And I was in corporate America at the time. And then, you know, it was always a joke with a punchline that was always sexual in context. And then one day, I lived in Atlanta at the time, and I would catch a bus. That's what I tell young people. Don't tell me. I took a bus, a train, and a bus to get to work. My first job out of college, across town. And one day I worked late, and that particular boss said, "I'll give you a ride home." And I was stuck, and I had missed my bus. And he took me to the train station and made this sexual comment. And when he got finished, his hand ended up on my vagina, straight up, no chaser. I'm 21 years old, right? Who do I go to? Fortunately, I had someone who could help me navigate that. And one day I saw him walk out that door, but not everybody has that opportunity.
Right.
So as a person who lived through that, and I've not publicly shared this story, but it's been on my heart, all that's been going on with the Kavanaugh hearings, and all of that now, and all of the things that are going on with him, and then even the Bill Cosby story. I can say you have to pay the price, but also there has to be fair, just system as well,
So for me, it's been a long time coming. When it first started out, I've gone through kind of a millennial education. So I have a daughter who's just about 30. She was like, right away, he did it, and he needs to be found guilty, and those days are over. And I was like, oh, but it's Bill Cosby. What were those women doing? He was a married man, blah, 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 blah. So it's taken me personally an art to get to the point where, wait a minute, that was absolutely outrageous. He was kind of a predator, and yes, we have to punish predators. Now, I had to learn to set aside the legacy and the way in which I think of Bill Cosby and his wife, because I'm like, we old school black women. So old school black women couldn't
Speak for
find
yourself
themselves.
on the old school part.
Couldn't find
You know
themselves.
damn well you old school black. Don't even try to act like. Let me try to act like you
I'm
new school.
somewhere.
You ain't
I'm
new
not
school
new
black.
school. I'm
You
not
old
new
school
school.
black. Don't even front.
I'm
Yeah,
seasoned.
okay, all
I'm
right.
seasoned.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
So
seasoned.
I'll be speaking for myself.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
But from the old school, some things we couldn't find ourselves in particular situations. There might be more Hollywood situations. So I had to get out of that judgment. Now, fast forward. So I've got myself to be okay with punishment. I think crime and punishment should meet itself. I don't think we should waste a dime incarcerating him. But if that's what the punishment is, fine. But since we learned that it can take 30 years for that kind of justice, I think that says something about how we go about investigating any accusation.
Because right now it's interesting. That's what your deed said. She said that you have these people who are saying, "Oh, Brett Kavanaugh? Look, that's 30, 40, 50 years ago."
But you never forget.
Some of the allegations of Bill Cosby were back from the mid '60s.
Right.
So and there were people who were saying, "Okay, believe her."
Right.
Which happened in again mid '60s, but then when it comes to Kavanaugh saying, "Oh no. Don't believe him."
He was a kid.
Or he was a kid.
And we prosecute 17-year-olds as grown
Right.
men.
So it's
especially
interesting
for
how
sex crimes.
we want to look at it. And again, I tweeted this story. There was a doctor in Houston, and this guy he was convicted of raping a woman who was drugged, and he had put her under. No jail time.
Yeah.
The white guy yesterday in Alaska, again, strangled a woman, sexually assaults her, probation. The former Stanford swimmer rapes a woman. The judge gives him 3 months, saying, "Well, I don't want to ruin his life."
Right.
There was a judge I believe it was in Minnesota or Wyoming, one of those states, where a guy raped a child, and the judge did not give him a sentence. And you're going, wait a minute, hold up. How does
this work? Right.
There is something about black fatherhood related to Bill Cosby. So we cannot have the conversation without thinking Dr. Huxtable and what has been done to that image as well. And that's something that I think those of us in the black community have to make sure that we take the conversation all the way through the arc to say that that image for black America is still valid. And we still respect and appreciate that time and what it's done for us. At the same time that we say that this man is a predator. And but that there should be equality in America. I think that's the song we've been singing a long time.
Yeah, and the
We're
bias
not there.
in the sentencing, there's still racial bias in sentencing even. And when you bring up those points, and so for someone who's 80 plus years old, there's no statute. There should not be a statute of limitations when it comes to justice, right? And so, what I think about, even in college, right? Just knowing, I don't know if sisters don't have a story of some sort. Maybe some may be more egregious than others, You know, had a good friend in college, date raped. You know, going through, and then and then she felt like I was date raped, so it's my fault. So therefore, I'm not gonna.
It
you
has
know,
always
press charges
been
or
on
go
the
to the
women.
law enforcement. So it's a tough thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Spirit Democracy Awards. First of all, who are you honoring?
We are honoring awesome folks. We are honoring Stephanie and Quentin James. We're honoring Apollo.
Stephanie Quint James,
yes.
founder of Collective PAC.
The Collective
they played
PAC
a huge
and
role
Vested
in the election
Strategy.
cycle the last couple of years.
Right. We are honoring Apollos Baker, who is a labor leader with AFGE, who's our board member of the year. We're honoring Linda Spraggins Dunn, who runs Odyssey Media, who empowers black women and helps sponsor entrepreneurship. We're honoring George Gresham, who leads at SEIU 1199, so who works on workers' rights and social justice. We're honoring Tony Lewis Jr., who's a local activist and leader here in Washington, D.C., who has a powerful story, who focuses on helping those who are returning home from prison, whose father has a life sentence in prison, and he dedicated his life to really fighting for justice and community empowerment. I'm missing someone. I just because I'm going not in order. Howie Hodges, who is works in technology and communications and has been a strong community activist, even from the corporate America standpoint. And so all of these folks, and I hope I haven't missed anyone because I'm not looking at the list, are doing, paying it forward, if you will. And so this event is always about being able to, as you well know, because you've hosted us before, we're going to be having conversations with our honorees. We changed the format a few years ago, and so we get the opportunity, and thank you,
Praise the Lord,
for being able to interview and learn some things about not just how they got here, but share some wisdom and ideas. And in a presidential election, as we are, surely we'll also be talking about this election, what that means, how we build black political power in this country, economic power in this country, and so we're really excited. And thank you for being here with us.
Felicia, to that point, obviously, we're about 40 some odd days away, 41 or 40 for the midterm elections. We have registration deadlines that are coming up very soon.
Yes.
I think in Florida is October 9th, and so we're not far at all. Same thing in Texas and many of the other states as well. And it's very interesting to see the level of engagement of folks. And I've seen it across the country. I think folks are going to be very surprised by what happens in November with turnout because, and not just Andrew Gillum in Florida, not just Stacey Abrams in Georgia and Ben Jealous in Maryland, but I think after 2016, after so many people who said, Hillary, she's the same as Donald Trump, and then now people go, okay, what the hell happened? I think people are now seeing also in the impact of what happens when you don't vote and you sit out an election.
Absolutely. I think people are aware. The one thing about the black voter, they're really smart. So they have been asking the question of both parties, what have you done for me lately? They're looking at numbers and they're wanting their vote to mean something. And they are focusing back at the local level. So it's not even just governor. But people are looking, wait a minute, who's my mayor, who's my sheriff?
Who's my DA?
And they're learning about how do we impact our life right here at home. So I think that kind of grassroots energy is really a big change for us because we usually focus top of the ticket. So now it's bottom up for real, and I think that's going to be powerful in terms of base building over the long run. In a nonpartisan frame, we've been out here way too many years.
Right.
And a lot of new strategies moving in some different ways really undermined our infrastructure. So we've been in a rebuilding mode the last 2, 3, 4 years. But we're getting ready to bring it in this year, and we're set up for the next 2. So instead of just looking at right now, yes, we're going to have some sort of a wave, but we know that we're putting the infrastructure in on the ground so that we get a comprehensive change with an agenda. Right. So some of us have been talking a Southern strategy and a black agenda for a long time. build labor, everyone. We've been saying, what about black infrastructure and rebuilding our communities? So we're on an economic empowerment message that's going to bring us around. I'm seeing signals.
Melanie, your final comment.
Well, first of all, thank you again. And the other thing is, if folks want to get involved, we have our Unity 18 Black Voting and Political Power campaign. And if they could just go to unity18.org, there's all kind of information. Today is National Voter Registration Day. I think you already talked about that. People can get information. They can register online. They can volunteer for our campaign. They can find out how to get involved in other organizations' campaigns. They can also just have information there to find out how you can register voters, how you can turn out voters, how you can individually do to help make sure that we build this black political power. Unitycampaign.org. Thank you.
Unitycampaign.org.
And hashtag power the sister vote.
Okay. All right, then. Well, I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Folks, I want to thank all of you for watching as well. Do me a favor. If you've got actually a reaction to the Bill Cosby sentencing, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to Twitter, upload that video using the hashtag Roland Martin Unfiltered, and we're going to share some of those videos on tomorrow's show. Don't forget, you can also support this show. Look, freedom ain't free. And this ain't free. I keep using the point. We got to fund our freedom. So please go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com to join our Bring the Funk fan club to help make this possible. And so you can also see the restream of this show at 10 p.m., at 2 a.m., 6 a.m., and 10 a.m. as well. Of course, you can also watch it on VOD on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. And, of course, you can also download the audio and video podcast from Google Play Store plus iTunes. For everybody here at the Spirit of Democracy Awards, the 21st Annual Spirit of Democracy Awards, I'm Roland Martin, and the discussions we'll be having later, we'll be shooting those and sharing those with you as well. So I got to go. I shall see you guys tomorrow. Holla!